Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, we've got the Restoration Shaman. We are going to be reviewing all of the healing specializations at this time, moving into Shadowlands, looking at what's changed, what is new, and what I think overall in terms of, can I play this spec for a long period of time without getting bored of it? Because in my mind, that is the most important factor to myself for deciding a specialization or a class to play in Shadowlands, as it is likely a big investment with WoW being an MMORPG with a ton of progression systems and a huge amount of grinding involved. I really think it's important that we review and make sure that we're picking the specialization that would best suit ourselves for the longest period of time. Now, I'm aware that comes with a little bit of a personal bias, so I will be looking at perspectives from all varying levels of skill. So whether or not you're a casual random battleground player, maybe you only run a couple of Mythic Plus dungeons, or you're just only a raider, I do my best to try and look at it from the entirety of the game and cover my bases in that sense, while still applying some of my own personal bias and logic. So Restoration Shaman is a spec that needs a lot of charity when it comes to performance, at least in Battle for Azeroth, when it comes to Mythic Plus and raiding. Speaking of charity, if you want to stop the bullies in my comments from making fun of me for holding my microphone, I have created a PayPal me link. So if you would like to send money to support me directly and help fund things like buying a mic stand, so the YouTube comment chat bullies leave me alone, that is down there, and I will continue to do as much as I can to make sure all of our specializations are a lot of fun to play, or at least make sure that our opinions are voiced. But yeah, Restoration Shaman is definitely lacking when it comes to Mythic Plus and Raid. In terms of player versus player for Battle for Azeroth, it's carried incredibly hard by some kind of cheesy mechanics. The Pack Spirit Azerite trait, where you're just sitting a Ghost Wolf for most of your time in PvP, not doing anything. It is important to note that Pack Spirit, as far as I've seen through the Conduits and the Legendaries that I'll be going over in this video, is not existing in Shadowlands. So if we were to say that the tuning remained the same on Shaman, I would think that it would very well underperform every single healer in the game in terms of throughput. So that is a big concern for me. Its toolkit is still quite deep, and I do enjoy the playstyle of the Restoration Shaman. The main issues are its throughput and its tuning, so hopefully that will be looked at. But baseline for the Shamans, you're going to be getting Flame Tongue weapon back. As to whether or not this really matters for Restoration Shaman will kind of be yet to be seen. Maybe if you're going to smack a warrior chasing you in PvP, or if you're just questing out in the world and you want to use Primal Strike, which is another ability coming back baseline to the Shaman, rather than casting spells, you could play maybe a little bit of a melee DPS Restoration Shaman for your solo content, so like Torghast, world questing. I think it's really unlikely that you're going to be running up to bosses and start punching them. I think more likely, as the healer Restoration Shaman is, you're going to be utilizing Chain Lightning to get a lot of your damage out onto mobs. And there's some pretty cool legendaries that may enable this potentially for the Restoration Shaman. Coming back baseline to all Shamans is Frost Shock. So you're going to be getting a slow. It's a spammable slow. This is going to have an excellent amount of utility when it comes to PvP. If you're thinking about all the demon hunters that chase you in 2v2 trying to mana rift you, you'll now have more of a counter assault to that. In PvE, it's probably unlikely that you use it. There's just so many other automatic slows in the game that are likely to be in your party that are already applied, or stronger slows that are already applied. But I do suppose if some circumstance happened where you were in a dungeon group that was composed so terribly that your Frost Shock was the only slow, which I think is impossible, you may use it in that circumstance. But it's nice to see it come back for PvP. A lot of the things coming back are a little bit more focused on PvP from my mind. Lightning Shield, which is a little bit odd for Restoration Shaman specifically, because this was a shield when shields existed in the past that you didn't really ever use. And I'm worried that it's probably still the case that you never use it. Again, maybe if you're doing solo Resto Shaman Torghast runs, you want to pull a lot of mobs, so you activate the Lightning Shield and you go for Chain Lightnings. But in PvP, unless its damage is higher than 11, probably not going to switch to it too much, and that's mostly because of the value of another shield which is coming back, which is not in the baseline. We've looked at all the baselines. This shield that's coming back, this is the shield that I love to see. This is the shield that I've missed for so long on Restoration Shaman. It's finally back. And you might think at home, this is like the most boring thing in the world. What are you talking about? It's water shield. It just gives you mana back. In PvP, I really miss when mana management mattered. Even in PvE, thinking back to when I used to raid more hardcore, like TVC Wrath the Lich King, mana management, not over healing, managing your resources as a healer, it was such an impactful part of the game, and you could play better than another healer by managing your mana better. So bringing back these types of mechanics that allow you to manage your mana are very important to me, especially in terms of me being able to continue to play Resto Shaman for 5 months from now and still not be bored of it. So I am grateful that it is back. I'm glad that it's back with a charge system as well. This matters less in PvE. Obviously, you're just going to be consistently getting mana back from it. But in PvP, attack the Shaman, poke his water shield off. Maybe he doesn't remember to reapply it, and then you get ahead on mana. Love that gameplay with the water shield. And speaking of mana management, we're also getting Mana Tide Totem back, and it's going to be giving mana back to your entire party and raid. So, Resto Shaman was lacking in strength when it came to raid performance and Mythic Plus performance in Battle for Azeroth. This isn't really going to help you too much in Mythic Plus, but in a raid, having you there to regenerate mana back for the whole squad is definitely going to be a good addition. On top of still having Spirit Link Totem, which is probably one of the best raid cooldowns in the game, especially for any sort of big damage raid mechanics. So hopefully these totems will keep you competitive when it comes to raiding, just not even talking about tuning per se. The main downside for Restoration Shaman has always been mixing damage and healing. In Mythic Plus, Restoration Druids, la-di-da-di-da, Sunfire, la-di-da-di-da, it's hit everybody, I pressed one button. Meanwhile, Resto Shaman is like, Flame Shock? Flame Shock? Like, you have so much more time spent trying to get your damage going than Restoration Druids or Holy Paladins, that or even spinning crane kick from Mistweaver, that you don't get to that peak moment before usually things are dead or you need to start healing. So that has been the main downside for Restoration Shaman. I'm curious maybe if they can utilize any sort of spreading mechanics, like maybe Flame Shock, and then if you have Flame Tongue active as Restoration, it spreads Flame Shock to other targets or something. Or if you Primal Strike a Flame Shock, it spreads it, and then you can Lava Burst proc. But Igneous Potential is also leaving, so your Lava Burst damage might be more negligible. I likely see a Chain Lightning build for Restoration Shaman in the future, and especially when we look at the Covenant abilities specifically. But as far as spells, that's it. We're done. And you might be thinking, well, that's not really that exciting. We're just getting a bunch of mana stuff and then some weird damage stuff. The mana stuff matters a lot personally for me. If you're a PvEer, maybe it doesn't matter so much so. But when we look at the talents, some things have rearranged. I guess I should mention Earth Shield as baseline. That might be important to mention. All of the shields are coming back, and we forgot about the most important iconic one to Restoration Shaman, which is Earth Shield. So you're going to get a boost of healing and also consume charges of it when they get attacked. Love to see Earth Shield coming back. They've replaced Earth Shield's talent with Surge of Earth, which I'm not sure if it will actually perform too well. Echoes of Elements, getting extra charges of all of your best stuff. Like, I kind of almost feel like Echo of Elements should be baseline, but at the moment it's competing with a lot of other things. It is a new talent, so maybe it hasn't been tuned just yet to where it's going to have a place, but basically you're going to consume 3 charges of the Earth Shield, and it's going to heal 6 allies near the Earth Shielded target. So usually Earth Shield's on a tank, so it's only going to heal melee DPS, which you might already have Healing Rain on anyway, or Chain Heal bouncing around too. I don't feel like Restoration Shaman really needs any more heals that bounce, other than the fact that it's instant. So you could reposition while using it, but you could also reposition and have another healing stream totem rolling. It seems not so good, but maybe if they tune it in a way, it will end up being competitive. High Tide received some nerfs, and I think this is in an attempt to make Ascendance and Wellspring more competitive in PvE, as High Tide was just the go-to for PvE. Ascendance was the go-to for PvP, and there's some crazy things later on in the video that are gonna possibly make Restoration Shaman crazy at being able to recover themselves in PvP with what they've decided to do with Ascendance. But basically, this bottom row may be more competitive. And I say may because it's just ultimately it's ultimately just parsing. As soon as it's simmed and then you know. And it's kind of just the way that it is. Ascendance has been the PvP one, and High Tide's the PvE one. High Tide got nerfed. Maybe you go for Wellspring. It's just you already have so many heals that flow out and bounce to things. Adding another one is just seems a little bit tedious. But that's pretty much it for the talents. There's nothing really exciting for honor talents either, other than maybe potential synergies with legendaries or conduits, but not anything new here. Basically, Restoration Shaman is just getting their shields back baseline. We love that. Mana Tide Totem for some extra utility in raid, more importantly, but also for your own personal mana management in solo content or dungeons and PvP. And then you get a little bit of utility with Frost Shock. And I would like to see them somehow make it so Restoration Shamans can spread their Flame Shocks more easily. And then maybe they can utilize Flame Tongue Weapon or Primal Strike, which you would otherwise not use to do that. I guess the dangers is that Primal Strike and Flame Tongue are baseline to the Shaman. They would have to make specific iterations of it for Resto, and that might not happen. But regardless, we're going to be taking a look now at the Covenants, which a lot of them seemed a little more focused on PvE. And I know the PvEer is like, well, that's a good thing. I like that. But as a PvPer, I was a bit concerned. So for Kyrian, you get the Vesper Totem, which you can reposition. You put it on the ground. Your next 3 damage or healing spells cause the totem to radiate and heal all allies around it. So it's kind of like a really hard to use healing totem that has drawbacks. You have to move it. It has to be in range in PvP, right? And it can be targeted by enemies and killed pretty easily. So there's a lot of downsides to it. In PvE, if it's tuned, it could do insane healing for your raid group, AoE healing, or you could even use it for damage. So if you were in Mythic Plus, you could drop a Vesper Totem and drop some Chain Lightnings and get a bit of extra damage on a pull. And that's where Restoration Shaman falls behind a lot of the other healers when it comes to Mythic Plus, is just being able to get damage out while still healing. So there is potential for it there, and I see it being strong in raids. And you still, once again, get the Vial of Serenity for a little bit of healing and utility in terms of removing poisons and bleed effects and diseases, which you can already remove curses, but you can also remove poisons. So only bleeds and diseases. And you can get some versatility from some of the stats on the Soulbinds for Kyrian. And you can get stun reductions and polymorph reductions in PvP more likely, but it could also be useful in PvE if they design any mechanics where you can see a stun coming in the next 5 seconds, position to stand still and then get the benefit. So Kyrian could work out well for you in PvE, but in PvP it has a lot of drawbacks. Curious to see if they look at any of those drawbacks and try and even them out. Venthyr are getting Chain Harvest, which is basically super powered up Chain Heal and Chain Lightning combined. So you'll cast this out, it'll hit an ally, it'll bounce to enemies and allies, and so that means it can bounce 10 times amongst a whole bunch of different targets. Again, it's played into what Restoration Shaman was lacking, right? Being able to heal and get damage out for Mythic Plus, which is a good thing in that regard. It seems kind of cool the way that it bounces between damage and healing. It's similar to the Adaptive Swarm for Restoration Druids. Much longer cooldown, though, at 1.5 minutes. But it is reduced by 5 seconds every time it crits. So maybe we see a Chain Heal, Chain Harvest, crit Shaman build, and synergize it with some legendaries. Running the Chain Harvest, I could see that. Downsides in PvP would be that crit is less valuable and you already don't really want to go for it as a stat, so it may backfire in PvP. This seems much more focused on trying to get Shaman's damage output up for Mythic Plus. So again, a good pick for Mythic Plus, somewhat okay pick for PvP, but the long cooldown and the reliance on crits as a stat in PvP kind of hold it back. You do get the Door of Shadows, so if you want to pretend and cosplay that it's Gust of Wind from Legion and you really miss Gust of Wind, you get that as a relocation effect. Necrolord, this one stood out to me as the best PvP one, the Primordial Wave for Restoration Shamans. It's basically another Riptide, so any instant healing in PvP is always really strong. and the most desirable because it can't be disrupted. Cast Healing Wave, you can be kicked. Cast Healing Wave, you can be stunned. Cast Primordial Wave, nothing stops it. So it's pretty obvious why it ends up being good in that position. You could also use it for Flame Shock to get some extra damage. Apply a Flame Shock to a target. So if you wanted to switch between defense and offense, you'll get that utility as well. You'll apply a Riptide for free. So you've got a good way of getting Riptides onto multiple targets. And then your Healing Wave will also affect all targets with Riptide, temporarily activating like a beacon effect from Holy Paladins. So to me, this has much more use in small group content. So it'll be strongest in 3v3 Arena, potentially Mythic Plus. It has a lot less AoE potential, like Vesper Totem and Chain Harvesting better for dungeon trash pulls, right? But this might be better for weaving damage and healing on a raid boss, maybe. It's all just going to come down to tuning, but this one is easily better for PvP and small group content. You also get the Necrolord Fleshcraft when talented into Soulbinds. You can utilize it to immune incoming crowd control while channeling it. Shamans are known and notorious for being disruptive when it comes to incoming crowd control. You can add more to that toolkit. So Necrolord would be the go-to for PvP as my first assessment. Of course, if they tune it, it doesn't do any healing, and it falls off something else that ends up being overtuned, then that could change. But based on the premise of the spell, it seems like it would be a good pick for PvP. And Night Fae could be either really cheesy and strong or completely useless. It seems like it focuses a lot more on damage than healing for Restoration Shaman. So if you really want to go for offense, this could be what you want. Fae Transfusion, you transfer the life force of 4 enemies. So you stand there and you just slurping up all the enemy juices, and then you release it all back basically, and you'll heal allies and you'll do damage, I believe. Well, the sucking part will be the damage, and then you heal everybody else. Again, similar idea to like the chain heal, switching between damage and healing, but this is all front loaded into one moment. So if you did a really big pull in a dungeon, you could utilize this spell, suck life from all the enemies, get a ton of immediate AoE damage, which is great for Mythic Plus, and then redirect it to healing, which covers the downsides Restoration Shaman has had in PvE of being able to bounce doing a lot of damage, especially AoE damage, while still healing your group. In PvP, you run the downside of that you need enemies near you. So in small group content, there's already only 3 targets, like 3v3 Arena, and they need to not interrupt you on it because it's just a channeled ability. I would like some quality of life changes to this so it's usable while moving, like the Convoke the Spirits is, because it's very similar in that it's a channel with a big effect, and the major downsides is not being able to move while do it. That's especially true for Enhancement Shaman if you're going to pick Fae Transfusion for enhancement, but it also would be nice for Restoration. You still get the benefit of Soul Shape, which you could think of as like a super powered Ghost Wolf that lets you blink too, which will let you get around the map a little bit easier, even though I would say Restoration Shaman moves in PvE and PvP pretty fluidly, so I don't think that the Soul Shape will be the main factor that you would pick this. You also get an Ankh effect or a cheat death from the Night Fae Soulbind passes, but you already have Ankh yourself. So there's a lot of things that are somewhat already good in the Shaman toolkit that you don't really need the Night Fae benefits for. And depending on the tuning of this or how awkward and difficult it is to utilize, it might not be worth trading off some of the other passives that you would get from Ventir or Necrolord or Kyrian. But that's my first assessment of the Covenants. Let's take a look at the legendaries here. So we've got base legendaries for Shaman: Ancestral Reminder, your Heroism, Bloodlust, or any similar effects last an additional 20 seconds. So you want a super powered Bloodlust window, you could go for this. The downside is that how many Bloodlust phases you get on a boss, how many Bloodlusts in a dungeon. As a healer, do you really care if it's timed around you that much for your throughput? Maybe in a raid. You can't use it in ranked PvP combat. Well, maybe RBGs, but definitely not Arena. So it has some drawbacks in terms of its flexibility with the content. As a DPS, you might care a bit more about getting this benefit, but as a healer, I think the other legendaries will be kind of superseding it. The next one is the Deep Tremor Stone Earth Elemental. Your permanent earthquake attached to it, so you can summon your Earth Elemental, and there are conduits that also buff your Earth Elemental, which we'll get to. But this then means the Elemental will cast Earthquake around it, which does damage and has a chance to stun targets. It could be really disruptive in PvP, especially if you're playing with Windwalkers and Death Knights, as Restoration Shamans have for quite some time. Stacking those enemies up with Death Grips and then getting that Earth Elemental out there with an Earthquake going on top of all the other disruption definitely could throw a wrench in the plan of your enemies in PvP. In PvE, I think losing the amount of throughput for a cooldown that's really long, Earth Elemental, you don't see it very often because it's such a long cooldown, probably isn't worth it. Deeply rooted elements, so as Restoration, casting Riptide has a 5% chance to activate Ascendance. Now, does this also mean that you get the immediate heal from Ascendance, which in PvP is effectively a lay on hands, which means in PvP at any time when you cast Riptide, you get a 5% chance to just top yourself immediately and start healing your team. That seems really good to me. It actually seems really good to me even in PvE for Mythic Plus, because again, being able to get damage out while still healing your whole group is a problem. So if you can just get an Ascendance proc that tops your team off of a Riptide and then start doing damage with Chain Lightnings, it could be worth it. This was another one that I think will enable you to do a lot of damage in Mythic Plus, which is the Chains of Devastation. If you cast Chain Heal, it makes your next Chain Lightning instant cast, and then casting Chain Lightning makes your next Chain Heal instant cast. So again, you could weave between healing your group, then doing damage to dungeon mobs, healing your group, dungeon mobs, healing your group, dungeon mobs. To me, I would personally like to try that in Mythic Plus. It could be a way to enable shamans to compete with damage with other healers while still healing their group. It's likely very mana intensive, which is going to be the big downside to it because Chain Heal is super expensive heal. But it could be kind of cheeky and fun to try out for dungeons. In PvP, it does give you an instant heal, but again, the cost of the heal might not be worth it. And Chain Lightning in arena combat where it might only hit one target, not the biggest benefit. And then again, in raids, this would be nice too because you get Chain Heal bouncing more frequently. And Chain Heal is kind of like the critical part of your rotation for raids since the dawn of time. So it might have a place in raids, but to me it stands out more so for Mythic Plus. Restoration Shaman specific legendaries. So we've got the Earthen Harmony. Earth Shield healing is increased by 300% if your Earth Shield target is below 50% health. And Healing Wave adds a stack of Earth Shield to the target. So a lot of tank healing potential with this one, or PvP single target healing. This is all just healing target, right? Or single target healing target. All single target healing. If you really want to focus on that, you feel like you're falling behind on single target healing. That's not going to get you to parse the highest. It is definitely in raid fights where it's all about just raid healing and triage healing. It won't top the meter, but maybe your raid group is not looking to try and get the top parses, maybe a heroic raiding guild, and you don't have a good tank healer. This would help you be a better tank healer. It's not a legendary that I would personally go after initially, unless the tuning does end up being ridiculous on it. It's just not as interesting as the other ones, and I'm not much of a, I'm more of a, I want to top the meter or get a lot of damage out. So that one with Chain Lightning and Chain Healing seems a little more fun. Jonat's Natural Focus, Healing Wave and Healing Surge increase the healing by your next Chain Heal. This could be good with the Honor Talent Tidebringer, which makes your Chain Heal faster in PvP. In raids, this would be a nice little parser. Probably better than the one where it makes your Chain Heal instant and then you have to cast Chain Lightning because you're only casting heals, so you'll get higher on the healing meter. It would be really good for raids. In Mythic Plus, it doesn't have a damage component to it, so I think it would fall behind because it is important as a healer to be doing damage on top of healing for Mythic Plus keys. But it seems much more focused towards raiding and then potentially some synergies for PvP. Primal Tide Core. Every 4 casts of Riptide also applies Riptide to another friendly target. So you could get a ton of Riptides up with this. You're kind of impeding on the Resto Druid a little bit, but I believe there was also benefits of the Necrolord where your next Healing Wave will also cast on targets affected by Riptide. And you can also run talents to, I believe, get more charges of Riptide. So you could just Riptide, 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 and then if you're Necrolord, get a fat Healing Wave that just heals everybody in the group. So that could be really good in raids. It could be really strong, potentially in arena, a little bit less, definitely more so in raids. And in Mythic Plus, it doesn't really have a damage component to it, so it might fall behind. Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem. After using Mana Tide, the cast time of your Healing Wave and Chain Heal is reduced by 50%, and the mana cost of your Chain Heal and Healing Wave is reduced by 100% for 10 seconds. So it's making healing Mana Tide Totem into an innervate, it makes all your stuff free and gives you mana back, reduces the cast time of your spells, and you can mash out some chain heals. That seems really good in raids. 100% good in raids. Maybe that's the go-to even for raids. Mythic Plus, again, doesn't have a damage component, but it could just come down to tuning. And I am curious if this legendary where your next Chain Lightning makes, if it does infinitely cast back and forth, because if it does, then it could be nuts. You'll have the downside of managing your mana, but Water Shield and Mana Tide coming back might be able to alleviate some of that. This does seem really strong for raids, and just making your Mana Tide a little bit more personally interesting. But right now, for me, if I was going to PvP, I think I'd be wanting this Riptide one, and because I'd be Necro Lord synergies with it, and then maybe the Spirit Walker's Tidal Totem for raids, and then the Chain Lightning Chain Heal one for Mythic Plus. That would be kind of my initial experiment, at least. And now we've got Conduits, which are the new feature to Shadowlands. They function like gems. You put them into your little Soulbind talent tree. You only get one of each. But the trees can maybe have 3 potency sockets, so you could put 3 of these potency ones, but you only have 1 of each of them. So the first potency, which is just throughput, is Earth Shield increases your healing done to the target by an additional 5%. This will also, you can power up the gems, so the gems get stronger and stronger. So this 5% will get stronger over time. Really good single target healing, excellent in PvP, great pick for that overall. It is well-rounded enough that I think it would work decently in PvE as well for maintaining your tank. Maybe it falls off a bit in raids if the other conduits are more AoE healing focused, which this second one is. Using Healing Tide Totem increases the healing of your healing rain. That's more than obvious a raid pick, because healing rain is going to be down most of the time. It's really good AoE healing, and then Healing Tide would just amplify its effect. Chain Heal has a 40% chance to jump to an additional ally. This also seems really good for raiding because there's just so many targets for Chain Heal to bounce to. Maybe it's potentially good also with that instant Chain Heal, Chain Lightning legendary to bounce it around even more, as it will have increasingly higher chance to bounce. And then Swirling Currents using Healing Stream or Cloudburst increases the healing of your next 3 healing surge healing waves or Riptides by 20%. This would be really good with the Necro Lord build, and then getting a ton of Riptides out, maybe with that Riptide legendary. So all of these seem like they do have a place. If you were to be a PvP player focused mostly, then you probably never want the Healing Tide Totem one. You'd probably want to avoid the Chain Heal one and go for this bottom one and the top one, Embrace of Earth and Swirling Currents. But if you are a raider only, then you would prioritize the other ones, right? And then maybe you have to pick between, do you want Earth Shield for being more of a tank healer, or do you want to just buff healing for everything? This one does limit you more, but in PvP, this one is likely going to be mandatory. And when we look at the Covenant conduits, so these buff the abilities coming from your Covenant, your Vesper Totem is 100% more effective against the nearest target. Again, it's already difficult to control, even though you can reposition it. It can be killed in PvP and even in PvE. The people moving around the totem are never going to be like, yeah, I'll stand next to your totem for an extra second, but I can't hit the boss and do damage now. So there's big drawbacks to this. And it would only be more effective against one target nearest it, so it doesn't get that AoE benefit. It's trying to, I think, shore up for the fact that it is AoE focused and not single target, but while it's doing that, it's not doing it in a reliable way because you have no guarantee of what target's actually going to be next to it. And do you really want to have to say every time, hey, you warrior in the back, that's my Vesper Totem, can you see it underneath all of the unicorn vomit that's on the ground right now on the raid? No, you can't see it? Oh, okay. Oh, well, I really wanted to get that to you. Maybe it would be better for picking up a tank, but then who's standing on the tank other than the other tank? You lose the AoE healing benefit. Might have some big drawbacks. Ventir will get the critical strike chance of Chain Harvest, so you would reduce the cooldown of it by running this. That's likely mandatory if you wanted to do that Chain Harvest build. And this could work out well for Mythic Plus, bouncing the Chain Harvest from damage to healing with crit, reducing its cooldown. Maybe this makes Restoration Shaman competitive in Mythic Plus. Tumbling Waves, Primordial Wave has a 20% chance not to incur its cooldown. More instant healing. That just screams PvP. I don't know what else to say about it. Just more instant healing. To me, the Necrolord is standing out even more and more as kind of like the PvP go-to, which would still have use in PvE, but you lose out on a ton of these damage bonuses, so you definitely would fall behind these other Covenants for Mythic Plus, but you could probably get away with it in a raid. Essential Extraction, which is the Knife Edge Fey Transfusion, deals 10% more damage and channels 10% faster. So that's super big all-in suck and then blast back out. I think you would be running a risk with Night Fae. It seems really cool and fun, so if you want to do it because it's cool and fun, then go ahead. Um, but it's like it's that one moment you get boned on it. Somebody stops you in PvP, or in PvE you'd still get the big benefit, but it would really only be dungeons, much less so than raids. So you do run a risk, and that's mostly because the other passes that Night Fae get, Shaman already has built really well into its kit. Like you don't care too much about a blinking Ghost Wolf, you already got Ghost Wolf. But if it looks really fun and cool, so it's a little bit sad that you can't pick it because it looks fun and cool if the other ones outperform it in their given situations. And they're all kind of competing with each other, right? Like Vesper does damage to all AoE, healing AoE, Chain Harvest does damage AoE, healing AoE, Fae Transfusion does damage AoE, healing AoE. And then Primordial Wave is like it is the same thing, healing AoE, but it's much less so, and then more instant healing single target with the way that it works for Restoration Shaman. They're all directly competing with each other, so it's kind of just whatever is doing the most at the end of the day will end up being the best. Endurance, so defense here. Astral Protection, Reincarnation's cooldown is reduced by 3 minutes, and Reincarnate instantly grants you Astral Shift. Again, for PvP, you don't care because you can't use Ankh. In PvE, if you have to use Ankh, you're already screwed up. So if you're a competitive player, I don't think you're going to pay any attention to this. Maybe if you're not so good, though, and you die a lot, hey, is it going to help you out a little bit? It'll be a little bit, but I don't know if I would want to spend my time ranking this one up. Maybe if it gets it to the point where your Ankh has no cooldown, and then you play with a Ret Paladin, and then you purposely die, so their Ret aura gives them damage, because you can infinitely Ankh. Ret Paladin, Resto Shaman synergy? You literally build yourself around dying and Ankhing, so your Ret does insane damage, and then you're both competitive in Mythic Plus? I'm trying to think outside the box, okay? Refreshing Waters, your healing surge is 15% more effective on yourself. Really good in PvP with Swelling Waves, getting extra healing bounces. This is really good in PvP. PvE, probably not as much, but it is throughput, so you just get some more throughput through this Endurance Conduit. And then here we got the Vital Accretion, which is your Earth Elemental increases your maximum health. So again, if you're running that Legendary to get Earthquake maybe in PvP, as I believe that is the Legendary you get through PvP, which is sort of just lackluster in general. But if that was the Legendary that you ended up wanting to get, then your Earth Elemental also will be giving you health. Although then you really got to consider, do you want to use it for Earthquake for damage? Because then you didn't get the health benefit. But you could utilize this as a extra personal defensive cooldown. Synergizes well with your Mastery, because the more max health you are, the lower health you can get, and then the more healing you do. But to me, it's kind of straightforward that you would want this one, I think, in basically any situation. But maybe not. Maybe there's some cooldown phase where if you had 20% extra health, you survive, and then this Earth Elemental one would get credit, and then Ret Aura Ankh build there. We got Finesse Conduits to finish it off here. These are all utility based kind of gem sockets you're going to put in your soul binds. Crippling Hex, enemies affected by your hex deal 8% reduced damage for 8 seconds after hex is removed. A little bit of single target damage reduction. This could benefit in PvP, but sometimes it's really difficult to actually go for a hex when you would want to get the damage reduction from the target. But it does enable you some damage reduction when teams would otherwise just either dispel your hex or your hex is going to break. So you could be a bit annoying with that. And depending on how it ranks up, so it lasts longer and longer, it looks, but it's only 8%. Spiritual Resonance. We don't care about this because we're not enhancements. Initial Bloodlust or any similar effects grant you Spirit Walker's Grace. So in PvP, you can't affect yourself with Bloodlust. Maybe if you play with an Enhancement Shaman, then they could give you Bloodlust with an Honor talent, which then gives you Spirit Walker's Grace. And then you run the talent that makes your Spirit Walker's Grace a reduced cooldown. And then you run the Honor talent that makes your Spirit Walker's Grace immunity to interrupts. And then you get 2 immunity to interrupts. That was a long path to try and figure out if this thing would be even remotely useful in PvP. So it's probably not that good in PvP. In PvE, I'm not really excited about it. Thunderous Pause. Ghost Wolf increases your movement speed by an additional 10% for the first 3 seconds. So a little bit of a sprint every minute on top of your Ghost Wolf. Nice way to just move around, especially if you're a little bit slow to reacting to mechanics. That'll help you a lot. In PvE, Totemic Surge, the cooldowns of your Tremor Totem, Earthbind, and Capacitator Totem reduced by 1 second. That seems really good overall. getting your Tremor Totem more frequently in PvP and PvE for more mechanics potentially. Earthbind, don't really care too much in PvE as there's probably other slows that are going to be used. Cap Totem for more AoE stuns. Could definitely be useful if you're in a group that doesn't have any AoE stuns in Mythic Plus. In PvP, Cap Totem falls off in its utility because its duration is so short. But this one seems to me the most useful overall in terms of all effects in the game. And that's pretty much it for the Restoration Shaman. So fundamentally, its healing rotation not changing too much. It's still kind of just the same old. Get a Riptide out, go for a healing wave, go for Riptide, go for a healing wave, drop down a bunch of totems. You got some mana coming back, which I personally love. I do think the base kit for the Shaman is already enjoyable. The main downsides of the spec competitively in PvE was being able to get damage out while healing. It seems like the Covenant abilities are all built around doing damage and healing to try and shore up that weakness for Mythic Plus. So there is potential for Restoration Shaman to be competitive. I enjoy the toolkit that it has. I feel like I always have. The main concerns would be just tuning. Is it going to be underperforming? Am I never going to get invited to a group? Am I just going to be a meme? That's the main concern because it's the kind of the bucket that's it's been thrown into by the community's perception and I mean its actual performance as well. So hopefully it gets tuned in a way that it is useful in all content, and then it'll be a competitive and fun healer. I like what's happened to it, even though it seems very minor, the changes for Shadowlands. And it's a healer that's definitely top on my list for that tier list. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below if you think that I've missed something or you want to talk about something specifically Restoration Shaman or want me to go over something in the future. And I've got links to my other reviews. I'm reviewing all specializations for Shadowlands in hopes of being a good resource for you to make a decision on which spec should you play. And my main focus again is how fun is this spec and how long until I'm going to get bored of it, because that's the most important thing to me, at least in the game, and I think it should be taken into consideration to be the most important factor for yourself playing at home. So thank you for tuning into the video, and we will see you in the next one.